Hello everybody. The slides for this talk are available on our website aa.killen.uk along with a few other resources. When I went to the Lincoln conference, I was inspired to give a talk of my own, but I was a bit stuck for a subject. I'm a mathematician by training, and the sociology of villages is a closed book to me, but mathematicians can count, so I could produce some statistics. Other people had produced statistics from the cast list, so I'd have to do a bit more. In my talk, I'm going to talk about the people and the data and how I extract the statistics. I'll talk about who talks the most. I'll break all the figures down by the three families in Ambridge. And I'll also talk about who people talk to. An interactive version of this network diagram is on the website. In 2010, Ambridge had three large extended families. But then childhood sweethearts Chris and Alice married. Do you want to say anything about that, Jennifer?
Oh, good grief, Brian. I'm related to a Horrobin.
But then they divorced, and I've maintained the separation on this diagram. House of Jill was in green. She has 4 children. David brings in the Fair brothers. Shula brings in Alistair and Professor Jim. Kenton brings in Jolene, Fallon and Harrison Burns, the policeman. And Vince brings in Elizabeth brings in Vince and his 2 daughters. Peggy has 3 children. I've coloured them slightly different shades of blue. Lillian, Jennifer and Tony. Lillian connects to the Snells by way of a grandchild whose name I can't bring myself to say out loud. Tony's family isn't unusual by Ambridge standards, and Brian and Jennifer have several children between them, but not in common. In orange, we have the House of Bert. I've labelled the House of Bert, but it could just as easily been the House of Joe if Joe were alive. We'll just call it the Grundys and the Horrobins. And remaining, we have a few isolates. Alan, the vicar, and Usha and his daughter Amy. Kirsty and her short-lived husband. Oliver. And Carol, Anna's going to feature. Anna was Helen's solicitor. To sum up, House of Peggy has 38 people. House of Jill has 25. House of Joe and Bert, 19. And just a few remainders. Right, Otter.ai, as I said, is a speech diariser. It takes an audio file and converts it to text, but it does more. It recognises speakers, and if it doesn't know who they are, it'll just say speaker 1, speaker 2. But if you train it, if you identify the speaker a few times so it has enough data to bite on, it'll recognise it from then on. There are problems. People like Tom went off to Canada, came back with a different voice. Alice drunkenly trying to seduce the policeman. People on the telephone sound differently. People sound different if they're shouting after an explosion in the hotel kitchen. But generally, it makes a good job. Let's listen to an example. This clip is from Jennifer's short-lived book club, and they're reviewing Mistress of the Paddocks by Corinthia Hart.
Right, if everybody's got a drink.
Yes, thanks.
Oh, would you like a top-up, Usha? Or Jim?
I'm fine, thanks, Jen.
Me too. So, we better make a start on the grand oeuvre you selected for our delectation?
Yes, we should. And I feel I should be the first to say that it wasn't quite what I expected, and it may not even be a very good example of its kind, so I think it might be best if we don't actually focus on this particular book at all, but talk more about the genre.
Oh, that's a good idea. You mean romantic fiction?
Mm-hmm.
Chick-lit.
More hen-lit, surely, in the case of this.
So as you can see, it makes mistakes. It doesn't always get the boundaries between speakers right, and it doesn't always get the words right. but it identifies the speakers most of the time, and importantly, it puts a timestamp on every snippet of speech. And by taking the timestamp of every one snippet and the timestamp of the next one, I can get a duration. And here they are. The top graph in red is the number of speakers by week. And you can see the drop where COVID-19 struck, and just after that the season of monologues, and then the number of speakers climb up, but they never actually reach what they were before. Underneath that is the amount of time each speaker spoke by week. So you can see David spoke a lot at the start and not so much at the end. I think the only thing I take away from it is how irregular it is. Another thing I can do is take annual statistics and sum it all up over each year and see who spoke the most for the last 10 years. 11 now. Let's have a look at them. Take it away, Alan.
Thank you very, very much indeed.
So, coming in at number 10, we have Neil, 1 hour 23 minutes. Jennifer, very much the same. Number 8, Eddie, very much the same again. Number 7, a blast from the past, a rave from the grave. Brenda went off to Russia with Matt and Lillian, and went off to London when she came back. Number 6, Helen. We'll see a lot of Helen. Getting exciting now. Who's going to be top? Oh, Rob, you're allowed to boo. Rob is pink. He's not married to Helen yet. He's the manager of Barrow Farm. At number 4 we have Shula, lying in her teeth to the police to protect Rob. And at number 3 it's Linda. No, David's number 2. So who's number 1? It's Lillian. Right, I'm not going to submit to that to you for every year, so we'll go quickly through the next years. 2014. Well, Roy sneaks in at number 10. You remember he has an affair with his boss and lost his wife. David's at number 1. Rob's still there. Helen speaks more than Rob. That's going to change. Alright, David's still top. Just pips Rob second. And way at the bottom is Helen. Rob speaks a lot more than Helen. We all know why. 2016. Rob's at the top. Speaking more than Helen. But this is the year of the great stabbing and Helen's trial. So at the bottom we have Anna, Helen's solicitor. Not her barrister, just her solicitor. Now Kirsty features. Kirsty's a great friend of Helen. Brian makes an entry. Certainly Lillian and Justin are talking a lot, and I can't remember why. Brian's at the top. This is the year of the poisoning of the Am. You notice how blue and green it is? It's definitely the Archers, the programmes. This is going to change. We just have one Emma. One Grundy. But Emma sneaks to the top. There are 4 oranges now, Grundys and Horribins. And 4 greens from Brookfield. 2020. We have 4 oranges again. Fairly low. This is the year of the explosion in the hotel, which is why Kirsty is there, because it's also the year of the modern slavery. Alice is there, battling her alcoholism. 5 from the Horribin Grundys. Alice is still recovering from the alcoholism. Kirsty's pretty top. She's recovering from the slavery talk. Linda's there because of the explosion. Right. No longer grunties, is it? 5 horribund grunties again. David and Ruth are there. Ben's there. Ben's there because he had a breakdown. And Chelsea's there because Chelsea got pregnant. Big surprise coming up in 23. Helen always causes polarization on the web. And there she is right at the top. Some people say she's me. And she actually talks almost twice as much as any other speaker. So let's look at this again. I wanted to discover who talks to whom. So I could just say, right, Jennifer must talk to Usha talks to Jim, Jim talks to Jennifer. Just take it in pairs, but I can do better than that. I'll just extract the names as a list. Here we have Joe, Clary, Clary, Shula, Will, Joe, Will, Clary, Will. I'm just going to assign numbers to them to make things a bit clearer. There they are. Joe is 9, Clary is 4, Will is 24. Shula, I think that's just a mistake in the transcription program. Now I want to break this up into groups representing conversations. And I can do this with a bit of mathematical magic called a hidden Markov model. And here are the conversations, and if I've got those, I can say, right, Jim, Clary, sorry, I beg your pardon, Joe, Clary, William talk together. 14 and 1 and 5 talk together. If I remember correctly, 23 is an unknown. The third conversation, 4 and 24 are talking together. So actually now I can say, well, I can sum the time that each pair of players, sort of pair of speakers, talk together. Next slide will show this. Now for this slide, I have summed how long each person speaks of the whole decade and ranked them and shown the top 30 terms, the top 30 people. You can see David speaks for 23 hours 39 minutes, Linda for 20 hours 5 minutes, Lillian for 19 hours 10 minutes, and so on. But since I've broken the recordings down into conversations, I can take each person and find out who they talk to most. And that's what the next slide will show. Now, you remember, David spoke for almost as long, well, just a little bit longer than Linda. But you look at these figures, a large proportion of his time is spent talking to Ruth, whereas quite a small proportion of the time Linda speaks to Lillian. I will come back to this. But if you look at this, mostly it's people talking to their husbands and wives. Except, looking at number 18, Pat spoke to Helen. But at least if you take the second speaker, Pat speaks mostly to Helen, but second most person she spoke to is Tony, so that's all right. Now I said I'd come back to this, and my thanks to the anonymous reviewer who suggested it. Dave is a farmer. Farmers spend most of their time in their tractors ploughing their lonely furrow, and they go back to the farmhouse and talk to their family. But other people, such as the shopkeeper, publican, vicar, they will talk to lots of people. And you can see this here. Linda may speak for almost as long as David, but she only speaks to her best friend Lillian for only 4 hours. So here's the reclusive end of the spectrum. Ruth and David are there, the farmers. Lily lives in Lower Loxley rather than Ambridge, so it's not surprising she doesn't speak to people in Ambridge very much. Mildly surprised about Rob and Helen. Toby and Pip make sense. And here's the sociable end of the spectrum. Jill's up there. She talks to lots of people. Elizabeth I find surprising. I said Lily lives in Lower Loxley, but so does Elizabeth. Susan's there for not surprising. Roy, well, I don't know. Linda, definitely. I said the village organiser would be up there. Finally, I wanted to extract some structure from all this data. And I did try constructing a network of who talks together, but all ended up with a timey-wimey ball of string. So let's look at the data a different way. David and Ruth talk the most together, so let's group them. Technically, I'm going to use a nearest neighbour metric, do some clustering, and show the result as a dendrogram. Brian and Jennifer are the next pair to speak the most. We'll group them together. Rob and Helen talk together a lot. At least they used to, they don't anymore. Helen and Pat. Well, Helen talks to Pat too, so add Pat to the Helen-Rob group. And Adam talks to Brian, so we'll add Adam to the Home Farm group, Brian and Jennifer. Pat and Tony talk. Add Tony to the Bridge Farm group. Similarly, Pip and Ruth talk, so Pip gets added to what looks like the Brookfield group. Edward and Emma. Well, they're married, so not really surprising. They're actually living in a mobile home, if I remember correctly. Justin and Lillian. Well, they're in a house by themselves. Clary and Eddie, they're in the farm. Jennifer, well, Lillian and Jennifer are sisters, not surprising they talk together. Joan and Kenton, they live by themselves in the pub. Toby, well, Toby's lived with Pip for quite a while. He gets joined to the Brookfield group. Alistair Schuler, alone in the stables. Neil and Susan, in their own farmhouse. Kirsty's best friends with Helen. She gets added to the Bridge Farm group. Bit of a surprise here. I didn't know that Jolene and Pat joined together, spoke a lot. And I think I'm going to draw the line there. Okay, Emma and Susan, mother and daughter. Not so much the Grundys, but eventually the Grundys and the Horrobins get joined together, and that's all I have to show. So, thank you for listening.